Hi, my name is Alexis.
And I'm Anna.
And I'm Evelyn.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Katie.
Hello, everyone. We are the Mermaid Marmalades, and this week's podcast episode is Our Flag Means Desire. Season 1, Episode 4, Discomfort in a Married State.
Mermaid's Marmalade. That's amazing.
Mermaid.
Dang it.
No, I'm going to keep it. I love it. Mermaid's Marmalade.
So, to explore the theme of desire, I have a couple of dramatic readings, exploring two different approaches. Because one thing I like to think about is what happens when we want something, and either a person or a thing. And then I found this thing that I was like, what? And I also think it's a theme of the show. Like, I think along with death and desire, I think those are some of like the two strongest themes and what this desire means for each character. And then realizing that maybe once you realize you've been sparked by something that you want, what do you do and how do you act? And then after this first one, I realized, like someone might be acted upon, and it works out, right? As we tap into desires, but it was one person's desire that initiated everything. So once upon a time, the planets and the fates and all the stars aligned. You and I ended up in the same room at the same time. And the touch of a hand lit the fuse of a chain reaction of counter moves to assess the equation of you. Checkmate. I couldn't lose. What if I told you none of it was accidental? And the first night that you saw me, nothing was going to stop me. I laid the groundwork, and then just like clockwork, the dominoes cascaded in a line. What if I told you I'm a mastermind and now you're mine? It was all by design because I'm a mastermind. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Strategy sets the scene for the tale. I'm the wind in our free-flowing sails and the liquor in our cocktails. No one wanted to play with me as a little kid, so I've been scheming like a criminal ever since to make them love me and make it seem effortless. This is the first time I felt the need to confess, and I swear I'm only cryptic and Machiavellian because I care. So I told you none of it was accidental, and the first night that you saw me, nothing was going to stop me. I laid the groundwork, and then you saw a wide smirk on your face. You knew the entire time. You knew I'm a mastermind, and now you're mine. Yeah, all you did was smile because I'm a mastermind. And so I found that, and thank you.
And you found that, or you wrote that?
Oh no, I didn't write that.
Okay. Oh.
And so like I started like looking for stuff, and all of a sudden like I'm like, what's out there and what do I think of, like what are like things that like I think about, like, oh, this has a strong like emotion of like desire. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is our story. Because as we explore, like, and now like thinking about that and watching and knowing that like Blackbeard's a mastermind maybe. And like he already knew what he wanted in this one capacity. And then he pursued Steed, which also I thought was so romantic. Anyway, however, to represent Steed, here's what I have. Oh, let's see. Look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? Yo. His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti. He's nervous, but on the surface, he looks calm and ready to drop bombs. But he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. The whole crowd goes so loud. He opens his mouth, but the words won't come out. He's choking how? Everybody's joking now. The clock's run up. Time's up over, blow. Snap. Back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. Oh, there goes rabbit. He choked. He's so mad, but he won't give up that easy. No, won't have it. He knows his whole back's to those ropes. It doesn't matter. He's dope. He knows that, but he's broke. He's so stagnant. He knows when he goes back to this mobile home, that's when it's back to the lab again. Yo, this old Rhapsody better go capture this moment and hope it don't pass him. That's all.
That's
I didn't
amazing.
know Eminem until you said yo. And I was like, an Eminem song.
And then I realized, because I just think the desire of these two, and it's for everybody. Like I said, like I think like the theme of desire is for everyone. And I'm just so intrigued by not only like that physical desire for another person and what that does, but also like you just have this thing inside of you that's like calling you. And then I didn't realize, because I knew this was the theme I wanted to do. And then like when we got what we got this episode, realized like some of these things we're learning about everybody. And so I'm just very intrigued by that, about like what we do when we really want somebody and how we all act. And what is that thing, right? That kind of lights a fire in us. And then what I think is interesting that we see play out, then those desires take you other places too. You end up going and getting things that you didn't even realize you're the thing I never knew I always wanted kind of thing. Which I love that. Or a job, right? A job, like a career, like a thing. And you're like, you're the thing I never knew I always wanted. And I just think that's so interesting when you think you know what you want and then where you actually land. And maybe someone was Machiavellian and like making things happen. And maybe you were just like letting your desire guide you.
That's so interesting. And I saw, this idea that Ed, he's kind of tired of, well, at least we're seeing that he's tired of being the one making all the decisions, having to have all the ducks in the row.
Right. Because I think we all like that opportunity. Well, a lot of people like the opportunity to be that show off and like, I know, I did it again. But then we see like the life is falling from his face. It's just like, that's a lot.
And then also like the spark that he gets from engaging with Steed is like that little spark of desire that's like keeping him going, which he didn't realize that he needed. And it's almost like he knew there was something drawing him into Steed, but he thought it was one thing. And that's why I'm so curious now when I thought about this, especially from the mastermind's perspective. Like, did he like see Steed from across the ocean and like, he's mine? I don't know how, and I know how to make all this happen. Like, I'm going to make all these moves, and all of a sudden Steve's going to realize like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Or was it just the gentleman pirate stuff? And then it fell into something else. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I thought about that too, looking at it. I watched it a couple of times just to try and like, can you track, like, is this intentional? Like, what's is the desire at the beginning the same as the desire at the end? And anyway, I have a lot of thoughts that we can talk about when we get more into that. But I thought the same thing too, of like, it seems like it might be something that you could argue was intentional from the beginning, or that I think it's sort of like, I can sort of see like as the pieces fall into place. And like Katie talked about with Steed, like with the whale before with Steed, like you can see the wheels turning of like, oh, I have all these different pieces and I'm going to put them together in this one moment and take action. I don't know. I think that is more exciting to me, to sort of think like, oh, it's happening. And it's a surprise to the character as well.
Yeah.
For the etymology of desire, I got like, I didn't get a really satisfying etymology. I got strong feeling and wanting and wishing and longing and craving, or an itch. But then I liked your readings, Victoria, because it reminded me of like the relational things that go into desire. So like, what about if there's not reciprocity? What if the person or thing you want does not feel the same? And then also manipulation. Yeah,
I think that's interesting, Katie, because I found, once I looked into the etymology of desire, I found the word so satisfying. I'm like, this is an amazing word. But I looked at the Latin where it was saying that if you take the part like desire, it's down star. And so it means it's coming from the stars, or it's hope to follow the stars. And like, they don't know necessarily like what the use was, but they think it might have been used for sailors. They're talking about following constellations to figure out where you're going, which I just think is so beautiful that you picked this word for this episode, because kind of like to sum up what it means, it's kind of like, you have a goal that you're trying to reach, but you can't see it yet. And so you're waiting to see what the stars will bring you. Like, that's what desire means.
I love that.
It's super romantic and lovely. And is about Ed. Totally.
Totally. No, totally. Which I think is one of the things I connect to with him, is his just this desire that he has. And we see him wrestle with that throughout the series. And it's interesting because there's stuff that comes up here that we see really play out in season 2. in my favorite episode. So I struggled with like, because I knew like I wanted to tie this to some literature in one way or another that wasn't necessarily my story. And so my first thought was totally Romeo and Juliet. Like so I love that you mentioned stars, because I was totally thinking this, like, again, like I had this image, because I start with love, and I had this image of like Romeo seeing Juliet at the party, and he's overcome like with these feelings, and then making that moment happen, because he had to go pursue, or at least that's the way I have it in my mind, right? Like, because then once they engage, now there's reciprocity, right? But it's like someone has to know. That's what I think is interesting. Someone has to know the chemistry is already there and the potential, and take a risk to even know. Because I wonder too, like, is it that you know this is going to work, or you're going to control them? And I don't like the latter, because like, but like, I like the idea of like, you find each other. It's like, how do you know this person's gonna like respond? And so anyway, I just love that it starts, because I totally thought about Romeo and Juliet first as like my like story to like enter us into this theme.
I like it, Victoria, because that also reminds me like the star-crossed lovers kind of trope that plays into Romeo and Juliet. And like, was there something about them individually that was star-crossed before they met each other? Because there definitely is something in Blackbeard that is this, like, he has a death wish.
Yeah.
Like, he's either going to kill everybody or he's just going to die. And there's definitely something that keeps being brought up by Steed, like, y'all going to die. Like, so it's kind of these cataclysmic, but then we know that things just don't necessarily have to turn out like Shakespeare. So
no, and I think that's why I didn't want to go all the way down that path. But but when you say that now, like, you're right, it just keeps going, because now I love the idea of like continuing to like align Ed with Romeo as this hopeless romantic, right? Because Romeo has just been has heart crushed by Rosaline, and we could align that to like what Blackbeard's going through right now. Like, he's going through some type of like broken heart, whether it's with his career, or, you know, something that he's trying to find. Like, he really has this love and this passion for life. And he's struggling, right? It's been just extinguished in some way, or minimized. And so he's looking for that spark, to bring it back. And that's where I just thought of like him seeing like Romeo seeing Juliet. And so, yeah. But then and then of course, like, now if we put like Steed in the balcony, like, I love that, like, in his finery. And then like Romeo, oh my gosh, he's in the bed, right? In his robe, and Romeo's there, and
the imagery is there.
It's amazing. Yeah, I think that's interesting to have like that frame of like that, again, like the archetypes maybe of like Romeo and Juliet, because I'm still trying to figure out like when he's staring at Steed in the bed, like what is going on there? I can't figure it out, because he's looking at him, and then he comes back later, and then he's like, okay, now we're going to get the cold rag, and now we're going to help him. And so like, again, like there's a thought process that I can't unpack, but something's going on.
See, and I might just be simple-minded, because or maybe I feel like I'm often led by the directors, and they like hone what you should feel in certain things. And I think at this point, I was feeling like it craves novelty, and he this theme of monotony happens in this episode, and Blackbeard's feeling this whatever. He's feeling like he wants some novelty. Steed is so different than what he knows that he's compelled. That's what I'm reading, or what I saw. It's like he's just more like curious at the beginning. I don't know. I'm not saying he couldn't have like this, I see you in the distance desire, or is it just like, I see you in the distance and I'm curious, and so I'm compelled? I don't know.
But I think that goes to your point. I think that's how Izzy sees it. This is just a whim.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that goes back to the Romeo thing, because the friends are like, okay, here we go. We've got another one. It's like, no, there's something else going on here. But if you have a history of kind of like being passionate, which I think is one of the lovely things about Ed. Ed is so passionate. Like, his heart is on his sleeve all the time, which is hard. It's a hard way to live, probably, you know, but I think
it is.
People see that and can maybe discount. Like, no, there's so much that's driving this passion, and it's such a virtuous thing to be like, I'm just going for it. But at the same time, when you're on the sidelines, you're like, I don't know. Here we go again. We're going to let this thing run itself out, but that's not what's happening because, again, Steed is different. But I love that idea of taking your point, Alexis. That I think on the surface, people are like, no, just a whim. Here we go again. Whatever, But I think that the underlying is there's something much deeper. There's a lot of depth there in those passionate urges to just kind of get next to the thing you want to get next to that. I don't know. I don't know if that's everything for Ed, but it's definitely this.
There's something about the way our minds work that don't actually articulate our desires, but they pull us. And whether you believe in some higher power or it's your inner power that's pulling you towards something. And then it could be years later that you look around and you're like, look at this thing that I was pulled towards, and it ended up being perfect for me. But I couldn't have articulated all of those things at the time. There was just this one piece that drew me in. And then as I got there, the layers kept peeling away, and then realized this was my destiny, and not in just because it happened, but it's crazy to me. And so I've seen this, and I guess I've seen it with jobs, all of a sudden I'm pulled into, or a past job, actually even more distant, a past job I had, or 10 past jobs. I've had 40 past jobs. And then all of a sudden, a job 15, 20 years later, these pieces all came together. And I'm like, what?
And I'm wondering how much of it, in that moment, you don't know if it's a grand plan or if it's just your whim. And it doesn't really matter that you don't know. I feel like Blackbeard's very much like Peter Pan in this episode. Mm-hmm. And his Peter Pan-ness but doesn't know the grand end where his subconscious or his choices are going to lead him. He's just going after something original.
And I thought it's funny you say that, Alexis, because then I thought I see him as Ed. I see him as Pinocchio. He just wants to be real. He's not real to other people. He's sort of this we saw before, he's kind of this ghost smoke person who's sort of just this thing that everyone's putting all their oh, well, and when he's talking about it doesn't even matter if I'm on the ship. And then he says, I'm a ghost, which I never caught before, until after we'd had this other conversation earlier about ghosts of and then he's kind of playing with this idea of death. What if I just disappeared? What if I'm no longer me? And you could take it as oh, I actually want to die. But it seems because he's this person who's held up like a celebrity, probably, I guess you could say, he's more about everyone's desire for what he represents and who he, what Blackbeard as a pirate is, rather than who Ed is as a person. And you can see that in Black Pete, who's quickly becoming my favorite character. I think I was watching it and I was like, is this whole show about Black Pete? Because I think it might be about Black Pete. But you can
I think he would agree with you.
I think agree. But I think Black Pete is great in that way because he sort of embodies how everyone talks and thinks and speaks about Blackbeard, which has nothing to do with Ed. And I think that's sort of what Ed's trying to express. And so again, I think it's funny how we start with Pinocchio and Peter Pan, and I still see it playing out, but I hadn't considered the Peter Pan part.
Yeah, Evelyn, do you have the way that you saw desire in this episode?
It pretty much goes along with everything. I liked that little end bit with Anna there because one of the quotes that I highlighted was just Blackbeard's little moment where he had said, I have one gun and one knife, just like everyone else.
Just like
and I'm
everyone
like, oh,
Normal, totally normal.
yeah. I'm like, you poor guy. And it's just it's along the same lines of just desiring to have. It's just interesting because although Steed has all this frivolous, expensive, all that stuff, it's just very much, I think Blackbeard sees it as just a kind of a normal human life versus this putting up, everyone has him on this high, very, very high horse and everything, and not considering how he is a human, he is a person as well. Don't forget that part and everything. Don't forget that I also have feelings, that I'm also Like there, I go through a lot of emotions and everything. I'm not just this complete monster that everyone thinks that I can be. Which he can be, if from it appears, but just very much like it's unfortunate. Like this entire episode, I was just all like, man, poor Blackbeard, poor Ed. I just wish like what like he's longing so like could really just feel that starting feel of like, oh, okay, he's just really longing to like not be not be this title that he has now.
His like I don't know, rock star status, he loved that. I could watch that scene over and over, and especially when like Blackbeard meets Wee John and they just like sidle up. That's hilarious to me. But I just feel like Izzy, Jim, I feel like their desire is a lot about acceptance, and Alawande is a lot about supporting Jim. Like that's a big desire. Um, a lot of them is just to like stay alive and be pirates and be good pirates. On Blackbeard's like Ivan and Fang and the other Looney Tunes pirates that just show up. But from Izzy, I feel like it's a lot about responsibility. I don't know. I don't know what his desire is, but I really want to know, Izzy, like a lot of your pirates died for this, Blackbeard.
Just another person's desire is Mary's. And so interesting. Like again, like the lighthouses, which is such a beautiful. Oh my God! So anyway, I swear words. Anyway, like genius. It's just so beautiful the way that's been set up for their relationship, and then the way it plays out, and that it interesting how. Again, the irony now of the lighthouse, where it's protecting them, but also leading them to their desires. By protecting them from this one thing, then it still led them to where they needed to go with their desires. Just like the lighthouse really brings Ed and Steed together as well, even though it's supposed to like protect you, from hitting the rocks. And so watching the seeds of Mary's desire here is also, I think, just very it's and only as we know like how more of it plays out, but it's very touching, I think, to see her desire as well. And to if you know what happens, like it's interesting, but to see here her her desires are not met here, but she's able to articulate them to a degree, and then to see their desires also, like to watch their desires butt up against each other, just like the lighthouses. To watch, I want to go be a pirate on this boat, I want to paint, and they just totally go past each other, their desires, and still like ultimately they protected each other from that and being able to find them in a different way is very interesting.
I just like that Mary, that's a line I think about a lot, is that when Steve is asking about these things, I'm like, don't you want to change things up, blah, blah, blah. She's like, not enough for this. Like, it also makes me feel like Mary just wants someone who can actually hear her. Like, can you hear the words? I don't like the ocean.
Yeah, I think thinking about Mary, especially with this theme, but I don't know why. I just never actually pulled the through line together of the marriage. They're getting married and told to be lighthouses for each other. And Mary's trying. She's trying to be his lighthouse. And she's like, here you go. And he's like, what are you talking about? What is this? What's going on? Did you paint? The kids painted this? And he's just like, again, completely missing her like bids for connection to say like, this is what being a partner means. And then with Ed, it just comes so naturally. They become a lighthouse together, and it's not even really effort. It's sort of like they have the thought at the same time. They both realize it. Steve's a little hesitant about participating in it, but then he goes for it because Ed's like, you can do it. And then they just kind of like, and then they actually are the lighthouse. And so again, oh, poor Mary, because it's not her fault. And I don't really know that it's Steve's fault either, because, thinking about, oh, yes, he did leave his family. And also his first request was all of us are going to go on the boat together. We're going to be the family on the boat. Granted, that's him trying to like make them fit his desire, not necessarily taking into account that she doesn't like the ocean at all, and clearly told him. But at the same time, like they're both trying, but they're just missing each other. It's not that fit. And I don't know that either one of them is to blame, but also too then have to make hard choices, which can be really hurtful. Poor Mary, just you get a letter and he left. That's hard. it's a hard life. So
On the topic of the lighthouses, it's kind of coincidence because I remember when I was like going through like the lines and figuring out the quote, it kind of stuck to my mind about like the conversation between that moment between Steed and Ed regarding the lighthouse and everything, about how Steed's all like, I should have like been there to lead my family, and then Ed's like, no, you avoid them, you avoid lighthouses, and Steed's like, oh, I never really thought about that way. I've been trying to kind of like I have been trying to figure out like, so what is Steve like in the concept of like leading his family, like like supposed to be like the leader of his family and everything. What did he take from like Ed's like, explanation, like in regards to like how he should have handled with his family, was what I've been trying to wrap my brain around, because the fact that he said, I never thought about it that way and everything. I'm like, should he like, so then is he thinking like this was the right move then? Like this was, I was supposed to do this? Like I was supposed to leave my family, or it's just going, I'm just going to lead them astray and everything, possibly have put them in danger if they did agree to come onto the ship with me, leading like them to possibly dying and all that. So that was the kind of like, so I kind of like that you brought that up, Victoria, because I was like, oh, I'm so like that line, those lines right there. I was just all like, had been kind of wrapped up in my brain.
I don't know if he knows. I think that's the first time he's considered it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if he's going to connect it to his family. And if he does, it might be like, yeah, beware. There be pirates here. Like, stay away.
Well, and like, again, Mary's desire for Steed to be part of their family. Like, can you play with your children? Like, I love the anachronism that's in this series. But can you play with your children? And please don't play pirates. And like, he just doesn't listen to her. Like, it is what you said, Anna. It's like all Mary's bids for connection, he's like, denied every time. But in the worst denial, it's not like I'm going to fight against you. It's literally I'm going to turn in the opposite direction and ignore what you said completely.
Anna, you said you had some more notes. What else do you want to say about desire?
Just that I think my favorite moment is thinking about Steed's desire. Like, what does Steed want? Steed wants a lot of things, but I think like you really get this sense of, you know, Ed's kind of, he's sat up and Ed's kind of looking at the fabric or the little cashmere, and like the camera's on Ed, like he's in the front, but you can see Steve in the background, and his antenna, like, and all of a sudden he's like, do you fancy a fine fabric? And all of a sudden you can see like he wants to be able to share his stuff with someone who also is as passionate and is excited about all this finery, and he hasn't gotten that. And so it's just really lovely to see, like, it's Katie, it said like he's just been stabbed and almost hung and all these horrible things, and he looks like horrible, he looks like he's dead. And then all of a sudden he's like, well, let's go and look at my wardrobe and all this kind of stuff. And I just think it's lovely to kind of get that glimpse of what Steed wants. Is he just wants to be seen and have someone really value the things that are important to him. And I think it's just really interesting that he gets that moment, and it isn't kind of something that Ed says outright to him. It's something that he picks up. That he picks up this really subtle thing that other people could kind of like just look past. And he's like, oh no, this is exactly like what I've been looking for. And I didn't maybe necessarily know that I'd find it in you, but I just think it's a lovely moment of their desires kind of like meeting up.
And the acting's phenomenal there in capturing the chemistry. It's phenomenal. Like watching this chemistry just like start like small, and then you just see it like get bigger and bigger as they engage, and the look on his face is just, and as those moments keep building on each other, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, of all the episodes so far, this script has been the most like disappointing to read, because I feel like there's so much visually that is there. It's such a great episode, but you wouldn't know it by looking at the script, that so much of it is like the actions, the facial feature, the expressions,
the eyeballs.
Yeah.
I just wanted to last thing. I guess like I'm still a little bit on the like I like, even though we just had this conversation about Steed, I still kind of am like, I don't know exactly what Steed wants because, very much this entire time he's been like, just want to be a pirate. And then there was like a little, one thing that he had said was like, he's willing to give away like everything to be Black Pete, like not Black Pete, Blackbeard. And all
He is
that.
Black
So,
Pete,
yeah. And so it just makes me, I'm like, I still don't know. Like, is it like, so is it just like, does he just really desire to be like like to be Ed and everything, which is interesting to see because Ed's showing the other side of like what so like it's been how he's been unhappy recently being Blackbeard, and like you have Steed who absolutely wants that and all that. So it's just all like Blackbeard saying that it's very dull and it's not what you think kind of idea. And I don't know. So still very much I'm like, I still don't really know exactly what Steed wants because it seems like if he wants to be exactly what Blackbeard is now, it might be once again the kind of similar life that he had with his family. But then again, maybe it's just because they have different personalities or something. I don't know.
I think that's a really great point, Evelyn, like how to articulate it. And then to go back to I think something that I can't remember if, it was Anna or Katie that said about Blackbeard wearing his heart on his sleeve. Steve does not, because very early on, like he was conditioned, like you don't do that. And so whatever it is, he has to explore more internally than what Blackbeard is doing externally, as Blackbeard is externally exploring his desires. And so, this is my thought, like, and I hadn't thought about this until you just posed the question. And I think going to what Anna said too about like being able to share in this stuff, I think, he can't articulate it either because really what he wants is just to be comfortable in his skin is what I would pose. Because very early on, he's being told over and over who he is wrong, period. It's wrong. And he gets in his marriage and then he's trying to explore things that he does want that's important to him, that he thinks, is this what I want? And tries it on. And he's trying on, it seems important. And then it's not received. So then it's like, well, maybe it's still wrong. And then realizes he has to go. So I wonder if that's why all this is so awkward, right? Like he actually does look super awkward in that leather, but he has to like try it on to realize that's not him either. And now I'm so curious to see as we jump ahead, maybe if there's, as we go along, maybe something I'm going to keep in mind now is like, I've decided like the answer to your question is the being comfortable in his own skin. And so I'm going to be looking for that throughout the series. Like, where can I tell that he's not this and he's not that, he's Steed. And we saw that in the last episode of the episode ago, or when he first meets Izzy, same thing. He's like, I'm going to try on being a pirate and talking tough. And again, like it looks like a child playing dress up, but it's not that it looks completely wrong. It's awkward. And so I wonder if that's what he wants. And then because he's more internal and exploring this, we have to look for it differently than what we're going to see Blackbeard Ed do when he's exploring, because he's got everything. He's wearing everything on his sleeve.
I think that was really well said, Victoria, because Anna's point that Ed just wears his heart on his sleeve and that's really hard is very accurate. I think in reality, when you're a person who wears your heart on your sleeve and you can't kind of control it, you have to be sort of Ed. You have to sort of be like, I'm okay being alone. If you don't like that, because you have to, people will say, oh, I just appreciate this about you or whatever. And I don't know another way to be than that. So I have to be comfortable with saying, all right, if nobody wants to play with me, that's how it's going to be. I don't know a good way to say it, but I feel like Steve, because he processes things much more internally and much more repressed, I would say, he kind of takes all of season one figuring out what he actually wants and being okay with that.
When you're talking about just how, Ed's experience is maybe isolating for him, which I think is absolutely true. And also too, I think Steed is very isolated in his journey because he doesn't talk about it. He's not expressing what's going on. He's not saying it out loud. And so I think that as he's trying to work it out, which I never really considered that sort of like introvert extrovert with the two of them, but I think it definitely makes a lot of sense that Steed is absolutely repressed. And then is also too like, I just need to be here to figure it out. But then that can really be painful and harmful for other people because they don't know what's going on. You're not communicating, you're not talking to them. And then they're sort of like left to like fill in the blanks with things that are maybe like, again, not true, but also very painful for them. But then on the flip side, Ed also too causes harm by being like, I have to work it out here in front of you all. And so like, it's just hard. And I think, again, they're both like neither one of them is doing it wrong, but I think it's just something to be mindful of like, it's just a really tricky process that it will always probably feel isolating. That like, I'm doing this on my own, and there's a way that you can inadvertently cause harm, even though you're not trying to. You're just trying to figure you out, and like you're saying, like be comfortable in your own skin. And so it's like trying to figure out how to be in relationship with other people who are also trying to do the same thing without, again, making someone do something or be someone that they really aren't. And that's just, it's hard. Again, it's hard being a person, but I think that's a really lovely thought to kind of like carry forward as you watch future episodes.
Beautifully put, you guys.
We have our reading practice of Florilegia. Okay, so I went to the episode in Harry Potter and the Sacred Text and wrote down what Stephanie Paulsell taught.
Beautiful.
She is the teacher from Harvard Divinity School that led the team that made Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. So she says, Florilegia is collections of bits and pieces of a monk's reading, a way to bring your Lectio Divina, your spiritual reading, to bear in your life. There are lots of collections of medieval Florilegia, and one is literally called the Book of Sparklets. The reader is looking for the sentences that sparkled up out of the reading. Then they'd write it down, and once a bunch of them were written down, you would have a Florilegium, and you'd be able to recall the things that you wanted to recall. Once you've written them all down, you have a new text. And when you sit down to read your Florilegia, you're reading a brand new text, and the sparklets you found in whatever you were reading are shining in different ways. And so for us, we're going to be individually choosing a sparklet and then placing them in relation to one another and see how the different combinations change the meaning as we put them in different places in different orders. Did we all pick a sparklet? Are we ready to share them?
Yes. If we can do this more than once, I would like to. But my first line is, my dream is wrong.
I'm going to say, all we have is this one life. We have to try, don't we?
I chose the one that I mentioned earlier. I have one gun and one knife, just like everyone else.
Victoria?
I suppose I do work for Blackbeard.
Mine is, what is even happening right now?
So the way we have seen Florilegia before is where you would have these sparklets that we all picked, and we would put some of them together. So if I'm not mistaken, we're going to have just like a list here. And you can put two of them together. We can put more of them together. We can just see how they look. We can kind of rearrange them in our minds and see kind of what other messages come out of the rearrangements.
I like that there are two questions in here, because what is even happening right now? And my dream is wrong. Those are very like good. I feel like they pair together well. But also I just feel like, what is even happening right now? I suppose I do work for Blackbeard. You know, like, I think that there's something really good that there are those questions in there. We have to try, don't we? I suppose I do work for Blackbeard. Like, I like the way that those partner up.
I like the way, I suppose I do work for Blackbeard. My dream is wrong.
Ooh, yeah, hearing it in that order makes you think like, oh, bad choice working for Blackbeard.
Even though it's himself.
So if I could, I'm just going to explain. If you were like, my dream is wrong is not in the script, it's because it's not. At the end of this episode is a song, I believe, called Empty Boat. And my dream is wrong is repeated over and over as part of the chorus.
I like, all we have is this one life. We have to try, don't we? I have one gun and one knife, just like everyone else. I sort of like how those two go together. I have what everyone else has. I got to make this work. I don't know.
Yeah, we have to try, don't we?
Got one life, one gun, one knife.
Oh, I hadn't noticed that we had multiple ones. One knife. What is even happening right now?
My dream is wrong. If you just put my dream is wrong at the bottom, that makes a really nice synopsis of the episode in a very sad way.
Oh, it does if you move it.
It does.
Like you make it home.
And that goes with the theme desire. about like where your desire is taking you and leading you.
Okay,
Yeah.
for the sake of the listeners, can we have one of you read it out as we've rearranged it?
Go, Victoria. Your dramatic reading was so good at the beginning.
All we have is this one life. We have to try, don't we? I have one gun and one knife, just like everyone else. I suppose I do work for Blackbeard. What is even happening right now? My dream is wrong. I think we can each do readings with different inflections, and there's so much going on in this. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think this also too, this would be lovely for Izzy. Like, come on,
Yes.
like we have to try, don't we? Like, I have one gun, I have one knife, just like I do work for Blackbeard. What is happening right now? My dream is wrong. When he's getting in the boat, he's like, well, this is over.
I'm sorry for what I said. Everything is wrong. I'll leave.
And actually something totally funny just came to mind. But what if he's like Chandler and Friends when they're in Vegas and he's fighting with Monica? And just to get Monica's attention, he takes an empty suitcase down. He's like, I guess I'm leaving. And then he gets her back. And then she goes to grab her. Like, there's nothing in it. What if that's Izzy, like actually packing empty things in the boat just to get Ed's attention and to get him to stay?
Oh my god.
I mean, it
And
works.
not for sparklets, but I will say I'm very pleased that marmalade and mermaid both appear prominently in this episode, those words.
Mm-hmm.
We chose it right. You just had to watch 4 episodes before you knew.
Which is crazy. The mermaid thing, I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Would anybody be up for another round?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Frankfurters.
We need to be a lighthouse.
All their blood's going to be on your hands. It's going to be your fault.
Peasants marry for love. Mary has acreage.
You want to do something weird.
I like how. Do you want to do something weird? Peasants marry for love. Mary has
Me
acreage.
too.
I think you could put, do you want to do something weird in front of any of these? And it's great. Do you want to do something weird? All the blood's going to be on
Frankfurters.
your hands. It's all going to be your fault. It's that weird.
I like that idea of repeating it. You want to do something weird?
Mm-hmm.
We need to be a lighthouse. You want to do something weird? Peasants marry for love. You want to do something weird? The blood's gonna, yeah.
I love that.
Like if it was a repeat.
I think you want to do something weird, Frankfurters. It's interesting.
And I like it too, because there's two things that were, I mean, there are a lot of things that were repeated, but like that, there was a couple that jumped out to me. Frankfurters was one of them, right? Because it's at the beginning when Ed is like, we don't know what the plan is, but he's the mastermind and he's like Frankfurters. And Izzy's like, sausages? And then Izzy says Frankfurters at the end as a like genius, like he's the mastermind, like he's the look what he just did. And it's also like a swear word because he's like, Blackbeard did it again, and so I like that it has a lot of levels on that, which is hard to work into this. But the other one I liked that I was struggling with was shh, because like they're in like the extra closet, and again, like the acting is so visual. The intensity of his eyes as he looks at Steve, he's like shh, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then they use shh again, like when they're the lighthouse and they're so excited and like shh. And so I like when a couple, like those are the two that jumped out at me, like were used more than once. Anyway, so I like Frankfurters for that because it actually does a couple of things here depending on the inflection.
Yeah, I like it as an expletive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dang it, we need to be a lighthouse.
Right.
Frankfurters.
And also, it was the solution for being the White House, or the lighthouse, right? It's how come they were able to be the lighthouse, because of the Frankfurters.
All right, the last section is our blessings. Victoria is going to go first.
Yeah, I'm just going to do what comes to mind. I guess my blessing is for Jim. Just because I just know we don't explore Jim's desire in this episode, but Jim has a very strong desire for something, and then did we already see that? No, we haven't seen that yet, have we?
No.
Okay, yeah. And so Jim has a strong desire, and it's interesting. It's the whole like, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. So tying to desire. And so just blessings for Jim as Jim explores their desire and what they think they want and what they ultimately get.
I want to bless Mary. I feel like she was the most articulate with her desires. And I should have noticed, but I didn't notice until you guys were saying, like, no, she's not being listened to. And that's so frustrating. But I did like, she is trying to articulate. She's trying to work it out. And how frustrating that must be. So blessings to Mary and people who are just trying to say what they need and are not getting that back.
Izzy. Bless Izzy. It's hard for me to not bless Izzy every dang time. He is the buttons of Blackbeard's crew. He is true to himself. He is the good soldier. He is loyal. He is caring. He thinks of other people. He's very practical. And he will play the heavy and knows that nobody likes him. Like, that's a hard person to, like, I'm going to come in and be the heavy and be the one to lay down the law, and everyone's going to hate me for it, to the point where they're going to mock me even. We see. So bless Izzy, because I think his desire is just for people to be able to live their life without dying. And I don't think anybody else has that same desire. They're like, what if we die? And he's like, really? It's just try to stay alive. So bless Izzy.
All right, Anna, who's your blessing for?
But my blessing is for Black Pete. He's an amazing character, and I've never really appreciated just what his journey has been before, but that he gets the thing that he desires. He's on the boat with Blackbeard, and here it is. And everyone is punching him and slapping him around, and he's just like, it is not what he thought it was going to be. And that's hard. That's really hard to have this thing that you've built up. And he definitely still gets this amazing experience. He's like, look at Blackbeard, look what he did. It was incredible. But before that, like Ivan and Fang, and I guess it's really Ivan and Izzy. Fang's not really doing it, but they're like just punching him and kicking him and slapping him. And he's just sort of like always the one kind of getting it, but he's the one who's really trying to sort of like be there. He's like, I will join your crew. And they're like, no, we do not want you. That's hard. So blessings to those of us who really work to get close to something. And then you're like, I'm here. And then like, you stay because you really care. And again, I think that is what true desire is. You're like, I'm going to make this work. But just also you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself.
How about you, Evelyn?
So I'm blessing Alawande, because I feel like we already kind of know he desires Jim. He wants to like be with Jim and everything. And I think one of the things that I kind of like I feel sympathetic for is that like her secret's out. And so it's no longer like a little special secret thing for Alawande anymore. Like it's that little special is like that, like him being the special one out of the crew and everything, the most special out of the crew, besides the fact that, he helped her escape and everything, but he was the only one that knew who she really was, who they really were. But
pronouns are hard.
Yes. And everything. And so I'm blessing Alawande. I hope this journey of like him trying to for sure figure out his feelings, because it's there. He likes Jim and everything. And I hope it all works out in the end for them.
Next time is episode 5. The best revenge is dressing well. And I get to pick the theme, and I'm going to pick the theme strength.
See you all then.